So Andrew, welcome to the show.
Will Polston, how are you?
I'm
Real
very
pleasure
good,
to
my
be
friend.
here.
Yeah, no, look, I'm really, really looking forward to this. I mean, I quite often say I'm looking forward to these interviews. I mean, I don't bring people on that I don't like intentionally. I mean, it would be weird if I did. But you, on the other hand, you're quite special to me, and not a lot of other people that listen to this would know this. But is that the tears coming to your eyes? Yeah,
Yeah.
getting
Getting
all red.
emotional.
Andrew, for those of you that don't know, I mean, he's a great guy. You've just heard of just some of his accolades, but Andrew's one of my first ever coaches that I worked directly one-on-one with. And we were just speaking a moment ago before we went live that it was 5 years ago, pretty much to the day, that I called him up and said, right, I want to book in, I want to have a session because I want to create this coaching business. And we spent a day together somewhere in Kent. I don't even know where it was. You'll probably remember.
We had a special moment in a little coffee shop in Tunbridge Wells, didn't we?
Oh yeah, blimey! That was the message. That was the time before that. I forgot about that as well. Do you know what? I've got the book. I've got the book with the first ever notes. Do you know what? I'm actually going to get it because this would be really interesting. For those of you that are listening to this right now, thinking this is a really different start to the podcast, how I normally do it. Like I say, Andrew was one of my first ever coaches. Oh my God, I've got it here. Yeah. And I asked him, I'm going to share this with you because this will be really interesting. So for those of you that are listening, you're now coming into the first ever conversation that I had with Andrew. This wasn't a coaching session. This was just a catch up it was called the Velo or something, wasn't it? In Tunbridge.
Velo Cafe. Yeah, it's gone now. It was like a cycle cafe type thing. It was one of those hipster places. I think they try to make it, where coffee's like £5 or whatever. Yeah.
This is incredible. So I asked you, how did you learn? And you said you got a degree in business psychology and you learned with a company called Coaching Development, which was the reason why I then went and trained with Coaching Development. Good old Colin Brett.
Right.
Three things that catapulted your career. Do you remember what they would have been?
Was I being interviewed? Bloody hell.
It would have felt like that, wouldn't it? But your technical ability, the ability to be it now, so own that identity, I suppose, and your own confidence. If you could have done something different, it was make it a me brand. Your foundation, tell your story, flip the switch, manage the miss. That was your foundation. Oh my God, yeah. Your biggest achievement back then was being able to be able to be a life coach. Yeah, wow. This is incredible for me, having looked at this for the first time.
Did I regard myself as a life coach back then, did I? That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've kind of meddled with that one a little bit.
Really interesting. Anyway, so Andrew was my first ever coach that I worked one-on-one with. We had a whole day together. We built out the Unlock Your Potential workshop, which back then, it's obviously evolved a lot since then. Originally, it was the 7 steps to unlock your potential, but now it's sort of 11 modules. People spend nearly 20 hours with me across 2 days. So we've evolved it a bit since then. But yeah, it was incredible. But one of the reasons that I got in contact with you, and this is always, I think, the power of your network, was that I started sharing what I was up to. And then a mutual friend of ours, Matt France, said, I know a guy that does that I play roller hockey with. And obviously mentioned you. I looked you up on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the other places that I could stalk you. You were doing some incredible stuff. And then I become absorbed. And one of the things that really caught me, in fact, I specifically remember going on your Twitter, and you'd done a TEDx talk at that point. And I remember watching your TEDx talk and just crying because you, like many other people, have got a reason why you work in this industry. And obviously you've gone on to achieve some incredible feats personally, professionally, and done some great things. And one of the many reasons why I look up to you in the way that I do. But I would love for you to share with the listener what it was that sort of got you to want to operate in this industry from way back when.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you sort of start out on some sort of journey, and it evolves, and there are iterations as you go through these things. And sometimes you stop and you think, well, how did this work choose me? And anyone that's a coach usually will say this work chose me, but there's usually something at a subconscious level that is kind of making us want to be coaches. Because I remember, I've always been a coach of some sort, even in sports. So I always enjoyed coaching. And then I worked at Yellow Pages, and it was kind of my first taste of consulting, going in and what essentially felt like I was coaching. And then I got approached by a company called Blue Sky Performance Improvement, who knew about my sports background and the fact that I'd worked in corporate, and said, could you come and give us a talk on the difference between corporate, or the synergy between corporate and sports parallels and so on. And it kind of just evolved from there. But it's not until you stop. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say just quickly, because I really don't want to discount, because it's a really important part. I started off with, well, tell us why you become a coach. But actually, I think there's a really important part around your sporting achievements, because you're not just a normal person that's got a bit of an interest in sport. I mean, your sporting accolades are incredible. And I think, I mean, it's up to you. You can either share that but now or share that sort of after you explain the coaching bit. I think, but we really need to acknowledge that, because I personally think it's been a big part of your journey too.
Oh, right? It's been my life, really. When you think about it, from the moment I got my first hockey stick, age 9, and had some roller skates on, and that was it. And then I just feel blessed that I caught a wave. I didn't, like, you played ice hockey, and you've achieved really good things in playing ice hockey. There weren't any ice rinks where I lived, so it was just street hockey, right? But what happened was that street hockey evolved during the 90s, and I caught this wave and ended up moving to Canada and playing in California, and then playing with the British team and coaching the British team. And I suppose, going back to your question about the story, all those things sort of came together. Why was I so passionate about helping others succeed, even with the British team? I was, through lessons learned, but what could I bring as a coach to the locker room that wasn't about the coach? It was kind of taking the philosophy of coaching, which is to be agenda free. Obviously when you go into that locker room, you want to win, and you want to win the gold medal, and you want to do what you can. But there's something bigger than that, which is, how do I create an environment for these human beings that sometimes we forget about, I think, in sports, that these are people with fears and concerns and ambitions. And how do I create environments so they can be their best version of themselves and play at their full potential? And I think that's quite counterintuitive, believe it or not, for coaches who want to fix players. They want to fix their problems. They want to set the targets. They want to, this is how we're going to play the game. And everyone intellectually gets the tactics, but at an emotional level, that's usually where players fall short. So regardless of how good you are, and you would experience this with your great work you do, which is, people intellectually get, I've got to do this, 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 and this. But when you come around to speaking to them, why aren't they actioning it? What's the barrier? And that's where we do the real work, right? So I was able to kind of explore that with the players and unlock that. And then that kind of evolved. And then I did the TED Talk. But as you know, I hadn't really stopped and thought about, why do I really care about this work? Why did I really, even my time at Yellow Pages, why did I care so much about these business owners that I was working with, whether it was a bricklayer or someone running a large engineering business or whatever it was, or a plumber or a hairdresser? I really genuinely cared about their business. And people would reflect that back to me. You really care. You're so different to some of these other salespeople. No disrespect to my colleagues, but some of them would go in with the book and they'd be like driving people, you've got to have a full size color ad, and otherwise your business will fail, and I was just coming in with a very different perspective. So it wasn't until the TED Talk when I started planning for the TED Talk, and I had this whole other talk planned for my TED Talk, and I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, this doesn't feel right. How am I going to be the next Simon Sinek if I don't get this right? And I realized that the whole talk had become about me, not about the audience who had come in, taken a day out of their time to be entertained, And that's when I started really thinking about some more of the emotional stories. And then it just, that epiphany where I was like, yeah, my dad died at 48 of a heart attack, just like that, when I was 16. And, I've just buried that for the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. So the TED Talk, and that's why it's so raw, was that literally 2 days before I decided to tell that story. And that's why I remember there was a point in the TED Talk where I literally nearly walked out, because I thought, I can't do this. I've put myself in a very vulnerable position. And there's probably a moment when you watch the talk where you think, I think he's going to go. Like there's a moment when I'm looking at the audience, my wife's there, my mum was there, my daughter, and they're looking at me. And I remember thinking, how am I going to get this out? This was the stupidest idea ever to share this story. And then it came out. And then after that, I realized that this was my purpose, was to help business owners. You know, if I could have gone back, my dad died in 93, 2 years after the recession in 91, which is a crushing recession where he had a big construction business, lost all his money, and never really recovered, and combined that with unhealthy, habits, drinking, to try and suppress all of that. So I think at an unconscious level that had just stuck with me. And then when it kind of manifested at a conscious level, I was like, wow, this is it. This is why I've been trying to do this work. It's why I care about these people so much, that it became the proposition. And even then, it wasn't really until about 2 years ago when I wrote the book, The Four Keys, and started talking about this. And that was because of my own hard-learned lessons that I've repeated, not the same pattern as my dad, but been all in on my work, putting more effort into the locker room for Team GB than my own family. And how does that happen? How does it, as a man, if you like, wanting to look after my family and serve my family and protect them, and I think I'm doing all the right things, completely neglect them at the same time, and my own health, because I was suffering with inflammation. I was getting gout. I don't remember. I say sometimes I was on the couch for a week because I was getting gout, and I'm like 30 years old, and it's old man's disease. It was the joke in the family was the only thing Dad left Andrew was gout, because he had gout. My dad was tough, like he never complained about anything, but when he had gout, he was crawling around the living room, and we joke about it, laugh, and so I was in it. All of a sudden, 2017, I was cancelling leadership programs because I wasn't able to get on my feet. I tell lies about it because I didn't want to tell people, I'm sorry, I've got gout. I'd have to make up some story, which I hated. And the worst part was my wife coming back. My wife's Czech, and she came back from Prague, a trip with the kids, and said, I didn't sign up for this, I'm done. And then she moved out. And that's when I started sharing my story with other business owners, like how is this my purpose? And then how am I repeating the same pattern, and how unconscious it is, for that to happen. So like, the irony, I think, as a coach, is that I was keeping this stuff to myself. I wasn't, it's crazy, isn't it, to kind of see it as a weakness. Yeah, I'm charging people by the hour to share their challenges and help them get unstuck. And there's me kind of just keeping it to myself. And it wasn't until I shared it, I was speaking in Ibiza actually, and I'd given this talk, and it was all very raw, because they were expecting me to give a talk about Team GB. And I looked at the room, I thought they've all heard the story about Team GB and what we achieved. So I just gave this really raw, you're all here with your 3-year business plan. You're all in on it. You're hyper-focused, but here's what's going to happen. In 3 years' time, your wife won't be there. Your relationship with your kids will be toxic. And any money you've made, you're going to be spending on medical bills because you've got so out of shape and sick. And the room was just quiet. It's like, and then I said, I'm going to get 5 people together to work with me, and we're going to talk about this stuff. We're going to have an open dialogue about it. And the response was just like, I need this conversation. It was like people needed to have these types of conversations, like real conversations about what it's like to be a man, what it's like to be in a marriage, what it's like to be a father, what it's like to run a business, what it's like to try and stay healthy when we're trying to do all these different things and balance all these things. And that's when the 4 Keys was born. And then 2 years later, I released the book, in a year and a half. And it sort of just built from there. It was interesting hearing you say about the conversation we had, because you mentioned manage and miss and flip the switch and these different things and how in your 7-step program has kind of evolved into what it is. You get to this place, you go, oh, right, this is why I'm on this planet, to do this work. And that's a wonderful feeling, but it's, you have to cross that threshold. You have to have your own hero's journey. I was helping other people have their hero's journey, but I wasn't prepared to have my own, because it felt vulnerable, but equally empowering.
Yeah, and look, it's hugely admirable. I think as a coach, similarly to you, I get all of those same fears of or what would people think, and what if this and what if that. And I've realized the more I can be me and have less of the mask, and I'm still doing it. I'm still learning. I'm still working my way through it. I've still got stuff. I think everyone, I certainly had a perspective in years gone by that coaches, they had their shit together. Like they had it made. They're like these, you talk about gurus and stuff. It's like they'd walk out on water and they'd just walk across the water. It's just, everything's perfect. Which really isn't the case. What I've experienced is that the bigger game people are playing, the bigger problems they've got. It's just how they handle those problems. And for you, obviously, the 4 keys are 4 sort of fundamental components that people focus their attention on, which are business, body, relationships, and mindset. 4 things that you, as well as academically, have an understanding of, but you've done it yourself. Obviously, you mentioned your own personal story with your relationship situation, your own businesses, your mindset, body as well. I mean, you've played at the highest level of sporting achievement that's even possible in the sport that you played in, and played against literally, I think it was literally people that you used to have on your wall on posters, right? You people that you grew up with as like on the poster on your wall, you started playing against years later. I'm right in saying, was that right?
Well, there's a moment. Actually, I've got goosebumps thinking about it. The person you're talking about is Victor Gervais, who's a French Canadian player, and I'd been played in Narch, which is the kind of, in inline hockey is the biggest competition you can compete in, and they had an 8-goal mercy rule. We got mercied. Like, it was just like, we were so far away from these players. And I came back a bit distraught, a bit upset, but I thought, what would it be like just to go all in on this sport and just be the best I can be? Where could I get to in it? And I used to get this magazine called Roll Hockey Magazine from America. And Victor Gervais was playing for the Anaheim Bullfrogs. And I just took I just had the cover on the wall. And it was 2004. So I did, 98 was when I went out. No, sorry, 96. I went out and I came back with my tail between the legs. 2004, we were playing against this team called K-Tech, and it was all, I would say veterans, but they were the pros. They were like the best players of the golden era, if you like. And I was just going down to a face-off, and I remember it now, like, again, I'm getting goosebumps again, just giggling, because I was like, oh my God, it's Victor Gervais. I'm about to face off against Victor Gervais. And then we got to chat over a beer after the game and sort of just telling where I was from. And it was just an amazing experience. And that team went on to win. They won the championship, the pro championship. So it was great. It was great to see that and experience that. Yeah. But it's a power of visualization, which you talk about a lot, and the law of attraction. And I was one of those, The Secret, for example. I mean, that was my secret. I didn't want to tell anyone about that because people thought I'd gone a bit woo and all. But now with the work that Joseph Dispenza's doing and the science behind it, and you kind of go, actually, this stuff works, and that it's very powerful, And I kind of stumbled on it, if you like, and then stumbled on it again, and then really started. And with Team GB, we went all in on it. Like imagining everything, imagining what it would be like when Austria lose to us and their faces and how they're going to feel. And it was like, we just sent that message out just every now and then I would say, we're never going to beat these guys. They're too good. And I slap myself in the face and go, yeah, absolutely, we're going to beat these guys. And I can imagine what it's going to feel like. And so, yeah, I think that's powerful stuff.
There's something, and I still use it to this day when I probably say it once a day to a client at some point, that I learned from you, which was when you're visualizing, thinking about a few different things. So how are you going to look? How are you going to act? What are people going to say about you, and what you're going to say about yourself? Those 4 key things. How are you going to look? How are you going to act? What are people going to say about you, and what you're going to be saying to yourself? Like, I feel proud. I feel confident. Whatever it is, and it is so important. I remember you again talking about when you were getting the team. We'll do another podcast at some point talking about the actual things that you did to get people, like the team GB to have that winning mindset, if you like. But I remember you talking about, well, how would they turn up to the rink? And you talk about, well, there'd be a winning team would turn up all in the same tracksuits, and they would all turn up. And it was that kind of thing, you were going down.
It was that facilitated thing. So the game change for us was when we moved from wanting to win the gold medal to what would it look like if we turned up looking and acting and feeling like a Pool A team. You know, that was the game changer, and everyone lent in. You got that lean in, like, wow. And what if our purpose then became to inspire young people that Great Britain could play in Pool A? Wow. You know, the gold medal became irrelevant.
Yes, the
gold medal was just a metric, you know. But what would it take then to walk into that rink and for Australia to turn around and go, what happened there? Where we beat Great Britain last year. You know, that's a different, same players. That's the thing. It was the same players, but just a different presence, different level of gravitas. So imagine what would we have to do? So we had guys that had never done a deadlift in their life going, well, we need to do deadlifts. We need to go heavy on the legs. We need to, you know, I want my chest out there. I want to be able to, you know, I want to jaw like the Swedish players, you know what I mean? So all of a sudden, you know, that visualization just took a whole different level. Because the players owned it. It goes back to being agenda free, doesn't it? You know, I can't say you need to do deadlifts. You need to get on the concept 2. You need to hit this time. You need to, like, whatever. You know, I've got to go to work tomorrow. You know, I could have 10 days in Greece and go to Dresden for 10 days and play hockey. You know, I've got to make that choice. We're not like Austria where they're pros. So how do you get the players to own that without being a dictator?
And that's something obviously you did very well as a coach of GB, and obviously you're involved in it in GB, and now you've transitioned that into business owners. I'm right in saying now that one of your goals is to help men across the planet become confident, stronger, happier business leaders, fathers and husbands. So that's for you now what the driver is. So let's talk about the 4 keys then. So business. So business is such a broad topic, and there's so many things. I mean, everyone's selling a secret sauce, aren't they? Oh, do this secret thing, do these 5 things and your business is going to explode. You're going to take this Kool-Aid this month and you're going to do fantastic. So what's your fundamentals for people that right now that may be experiencing burnout? Maybe they're at where you once were a few years ago. They're having issues with business, or they are going, in 3 years time, I've just got to get to this point in 3 years. What's the actions for those guys?
Well, I think you're right around the business side. You know, when you, particularly marketing now, social media marketing has kind of opened up all these kind of marketing entrepreneurs that pretty much, from what I can tell, are just selling to themselves. So they created this kind of ecosystem where every marketer is selling to the other marketers. So that's created confusion amongst a lot of business owners because they don't know what to do. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing, where they're supposed to be promoting their product, are they supposed to do Facebook ads, are they supposed to do all this kind of stuff. So we strip it right back to business hasn't really changed that much. But the first thing you've got to do is get very clear on your vision. You know, so in the 4 keys, it's always, what's the big vision? 12 months, 3 years, that fluffy emotive, what's it going to feel like? You know, like you said earlier, how am I going to look in this business? What type of leader am I going to be? Who are my clients? Who do I want to serve? How do my clients benefit from this work that I'm doing? And getting really clear on that, you know, like any entrepreneur, which is someone out there's got a problem and I've got a solution. That's it. You know, and that's always the starting point. And it amazes me still, and I have to really push my clients on this, which is, you know, you can't sell to everybody, you know, which is who are you dealing with? Who is the person? And as you know, I've done a lot of work with recruitment, and they'll say their niche, but until we really push them on what their niche is, that's when they get the traction, when they go micro niche and they get tumbleweed. That's the panic, right? Because they get tumbleweed when they do it, when they put content out and so on. But what they realize over time is that they get more referrals. And when you get more referrals, you get more work. And so big on that. That's kind of the big premise. So for me, I guess my sweet spot with business is, you know, clarity around the vision and the purpose, your branding and your culture, depending on the size of the business. But even as a one person business, you know, what are your values? How are you showing up? What are you prepared to negotiate on and not negotiate on so that you stay on your path? So that's more emotive engagement, but also what are your metrics and what are your processes? So what are you going to do every single day that's going to hit those numbers, and keeping it really simple. So that's when we get deep dive into business, that's kind of where it goes. But that's initially, it's just what is your vision and what's your 90-day game plan. We always look at, in every key, what's your single biggest challenge right now? What's your desired outcome in 90 days? What ideas have you got? Let's explore those. Let's test them. Let's stay agile. Right, let's execute, review, execute, review. And we're constantly doing that. So that's a big part of the business. But I believe less is more. Don't overcomplicate things. Keep it simple. You know, what's the problem? What's your product? Yeah. And how do you fill that gap and make people want to buy from you? That's how we have to do it. Whether you're a coach or an engineer.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and wholeheartedly. I think that you're so right in terms of I've talked about the micros and the macros. You know, you've got the macro goals. I talk about having a North Star, 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, whatever that is. But then ultimately, it doesn't matter what those goals are. Even 90-day goals are what you're doing today. What's the small actions that you're taking that are going to enable that to compound and the beauty of that is that when you do double down and you focus on those actions and you just get into it, all of a sudden it's like you look back and you're like, oh my God, wow, this is what I've achieved.
Absolutely.
When you focus on it. It's so cliche, isn't it? It's focus on the process. We've all heard it. Every single one of us have read a motivational quote of some sort that's done that. We've probably shared them both ourselves, but that's really powerful.
But you could read a book 100 years ago and it will sound similar to Atomic Habits, you know what I mean, or another book that's out there that's come out recently. I mean, and that's the thing. It's important to keep it fresh and bring it into today's world, but when you strip it right back, for the most part, anything that's existed during the last 250 years that's been successful, whether it's Fordism, whether it's what's Adam Smith, whatever these people that have achieved amazing things, they followed some sort of process. They've identified a potential problem. They've disrupted the market, and people talk about disruption in a kind of sexy, fun marketing way. But, to stand out, you've always got to step back and say, right, this needs disrupting. What's going to be the again, a cliche, but USP around this?
Yeah, for sure. Body. So, but by body, you mean what do you mean by body?
So body is, going back to my point about inflammation in the body, is how do you want to feel in your body? So if someone comes to me and says, in 12 weeks time, I want a 6-pack, I would say, go and speak to a PT, put yourself in a calorie deficit, train every day. And at the end of the 12 weeks, you'll probably hate food and you'll probably hate training. that's and then you'll probably, do it again another few, months later or something. So what we're about really is how do you want to feel in your body? And if you get a 6-pack off the back of that, then great. But so one of the things to talk about is always be ready. So most people I deal with are fathers and they've got sons, daughters, and always ready. There you go. Nice.
So for those of you that listen to this, so Andrew, I've had the pleasure of working with him quite a bit, and he has some magnets, and I've actually got 2 of these magnets stuck on my radiator.
Always ready.
That I see. One of them says "always ready," and the other one says
"speak the truth."
Nice.
Yeah, love it. So yeah, the always ready sort of value, if you like, is if I had to pick my son up and sprint to safety, would I be strong enough to do it? Would I have the capacity? Would I feel good enough in my body to do that, or protect my wife or friend or whatever it is? So the focus is always, when it comes to body, is strength. We always focus on strength. It's not about massive gains. It's not about getting ripped. It's just about strength. So big fan of Strong First and their philosophy. Big fan of the kettlebells, you probably see for those that are watching behind me. And so for me, it is about that. I'm a big fan of a primal aligned diet, so I know we've talked about this in the past. I've gone through different sort of evolutions, and I've studied diet, particularly from my own perspective, because of inflammation in the body. And I've found that a ketogenic or a primal diet or somewhere between paleo and carnivore works for me. And I've found that helping others, some of the guys I work with have been pre-diabetic, so reducing carbohydrate. I'm not demonizing carbs in any way, but I think there's a time and a place to reduce them, and people can benefit hugely from that. But for the most part, it's eliminate seed oil, eliminate sugar as much as you can, be sensible with alcohol, stay off the grains if you can, if you came to Prague, Will, and I don't know if you did the 365, I don't know if you're having a beer these days, but I said if you came, I'd probably have a beer with you, but I'd have two. We're not going to get on it. You know what I mean? So that's just where I am with things like alcohol, and I can take a tactical break for months. I've thought about giving up entirely, but I thought, I don't, I have one beer. The days of kind of thinking beer served a purpose, which was just to get wasted, are way gone now. The pain of, I had a glass of wine last night, and even this morning, I said to my wife, I was like, hang on, I just don't tolerate it as much. So for me, people could do very well if they eliminate sugar, they eliminate alcohol, they eliminate grains, and seed oil is probably one of the most insidious or secret things that kind of show up in our diet. And I would strongly recommend staying off that, because that's probably one of the most inflammatory.
It's really interesting.
Problems.
So I had this relationship. I mean, as you just mentioned, back in 2018, I decided to have a year off alcohol. I ended up going about 18 months. I had a few drinks and a few nights out, had 2 big nights out, and just thought to myself, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
For me, the downside is so big. The upside for me is it's just there isn't one. For me nowadays, I go out on a big night out, and people would argue, and rightly so, well, just you don't have to drink to that extreme and all the rest of it, and I get that. But even then, when I was going out and having just 2 or 3, really, for what I was getting from that 2 or 3, I didn't need to. If it was, I'm a huge meditator now, as I know you're keen on meditation as well, and I'll meditate most mornings. So I don't have that need of getting to the end of the week on a Friday and going, oh my God, I need to have a beer because it's been a really stressful week. I've maintained what's the word? I've managed stress levels and various other things throughout the week ongoing, which personally I think is a much better way of doing it than getting to a Friday having a big blitz. But again, I'm not anti-drinking. I'm not someone to preach you need to stop drinking. It was a choice for me, and it's still a choice. I've said that I'm not going to drink for the foreseeable future, but I'm not saying I'm never drinking again. It's not having that label on it,
No, and I think you spoke to Andy Ramage, and I've spoken to him a few times, had him on the podcast, and great guy, and I love what he's doing, and I like the fact that he's not preaching. I like the idea of a tactical break. I think that's a smart thing. Smart way of looking at it, and then you can kind of manage it. You can challenge yourself, and then you start, like you say, you start to experience how productive you can be and how the world changes. I mean, that was the thing for me when you start eliminating some of these things that cause inflammation, because people think of inflammation immediately, think of the joints, right? And that is obviously a big part of it, and muscles, and but it's also the way we think, the clarity of thought, and that was the biggest changer for me, biggest game changer. And I think the biggest one for me, I know we've spoken about it, and was doing the carnivore diet. And I still to this day, I don't know whether it was because I eliminated so much, because I was only eating only meat, like just ribeyes every day, and eating probably 3 to 4 8-ounce steaks a day, which is not sustainable for the bank balance, but it was great. But the impact on my cognitive ability and my cardiovascular system was incredible. So I don't know if it was because of the meat or because of eliminating all the other things.
Yes, it's an interesting one to play with, isn't it? I mean, I remember, so again, for those of you that listen, Andrew's got a couple of fantastic businesses, one of which I have the privilege of being one of your coaches. So I come in and support with as sort of part of the leadership team with certain organizations, and Andrew and I and another colleague of his flew out to Holland, and we were in sort of just outside of Amsterdam, and you were in the morning in for breakfast. You'd go. We did sort of a primal workout together, and
that's right.
Have your breakfast. But again, for you look into the research in depth. That's what I really like. Is that you're not someone to. I'm really curious. I want to know why everything. And for you, it was gout that originally started. I believe I'm right in saying it was originally started, and you were trying to. But you noticed that if you had more of a carnivore diet, then you wouldn't have the issues with gout. And that was, I'm right in saying that, was that the case or?
100%. Yeah. Well, it started with keto.
Right.
So, and I have to give credit to a PT or a nutrition guy that I was working with at the time. And so basically, if you got gout, you go to a doctor. The doctor says, don't eat foods high in purines. Right, that's the first thing you get told, which is meat, and a whole list of food from spinach to mushrooms to, and you're told not to eat nightshades and all this kind of stuff. So I went vegan. I did that, and did that for 8 months. Still getting gout. Couldn't understand it. Felt lethargic. Felt tired. And then he just said to me, maybe you should consider the ketogenic diet. And I was familiar with paleo then, but paleo was really a thing I did because it was part of the CrossFit community, and some of the guys in GB were doing it, and it was all about eating clean and all that kind of stuff. And it just seemed like nice food, but I was still getting gout even on paleo sometimes. So the thing is not to focus on gout. The thing for anybody is to focus on metabolic health, your gut health and your metabolic flexibility. So I have metabolic flexibility, which enables me to have a beer every now and then. It enables me to have a couple of slices of pizza, or because I've got what I believe now is good gut health. If I push the boundaries on it, then I know it's coming. And alcohol and things like that will do that. So that was where the research started. Now, when you've got anyone that's listening to this or watching this that's had gout, you spend the entire time on the internet trying to figure out how to stop it from hurting so much. I mean, anyone will be lost in the internet, and it's the most confusing thing ever because there's so many conflicting messages. So that's what set me on the path. And then I did this thing with the ketogenic diet, and the first thing I noticed was just a lift of fog. Like I just felt clearer. That was the first thing that happened. I got a pain in my toe straight away. And I went back to him and said, look, I think this ketogenic diet might have triggered gout. He said, yeah, that's common. He said, it won't be really painful, like, where you're debilitated and you're laying on the couch. It will just be sore. Just be patient with it. And I did that, and he was right. And then I came out the other end of it. And whenever I've deviated from it, or I've had too much sugar, I noticed the pain. I've not had a flare up since I've been ketogenic. I've had the odd twinge, but I've not had that flare up where I'm biting into the pillow, screaming in pain or crawling to the toilet or anything like that. And this will resonate with anyone that's got gout, had gout. So I'm a big fan of just, and I say to people, treat your gout like type 2 diabetes. What would you do? You'd reduce your carbs, stay off the white rice, stay off, stay off anything that spikes glucose in the body. Try to stay away from stress or anything that's going to create that fight-flight response. Which is why I believe that when you do a ketogenic diet, your body goes into a bit of stress because it's saying, where's the sugar? Where's the glucose? As you're transitioning from a glucose burner to a fat burner. But it's N equals 1. I always say this to people. People come to me and they say, can you advise me or help me on this? And I said, well, look, this is what I did. Here's the disclaimer, try it. And more often than not, people come back and say, wow, that was amazing. So I do like a 21-day reset where people can just do something for 21 days. And they just download it and just help them out. And I had a guy email me just last week. He said he did it, and his numbers on his glucose levels have dropped massively. He's feeling better. He's lost weight. So just very simple,
I think, I'm partial. I don't have gout, fortunately, touch wood. Don't get it either. But sugar is my go-to, and the inflammation I've experienced from sugar. Back in April, I did, and I've done it a few times now. I've done no sugar at all for 30 days. It's a bit of a reset. So rather than do the yo-yo, it's like, right, that's the reset. And then I go back to sort of having more of a managed thing.
It's a nice way of looking at it, I think. Look at it as a reset the gut. Yeah.
And again, similarly, massive clarity of thinking, energy levels, super consistent rather than having that up and down energy that we all experience. And it's really, really powerful.
Yeah. It is, and the challenge we've got at the moment is that people will, belittle it in a way. So I hear people like James Smith PT, Do you watch him at all?
No.
You heard of him?
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. So he PT and really found his identity, you know, who he is, how he shows up, very authentic, but belittles the idea of this kind of, you know, calories are calories, you know. But the problem is that as you get older, you become less tolerant of certain types of calories. I think in your 20s, you can eat whatever you like. You can eat pizza, you can go out drinking all night, turn up, play hockey. You can do all these different things and the body just seems to cope. And then all of a sudden overnight you go, how on earth did I ever do that? You know, as soon as I eat this or try this, you know, something happens in my body and we become less metabolically flexible in that sense. You know, the body becomes less tolerant. So I think that it's something for people as you kind of move through your 30s onwards that you have to be really mindful of, because the body won't adapt as well to some of these foods that aren't supposed to be in our diet. You know, that's the reality.
Yeah, without doubt.
So that was a long kind of.
Yeah, well, no, I think it's interesting because it was important because I knew that when you're going to talk about body, it was going to be moving and nutrition, which, let's face it, anything health and fitness related is. But I know that you have such a unique spin on it, and for your own personal reasons, and again, you go deep into the research. But you're not a preacher. You're like, hey, look, it worked for me. Try it. And I've always got admiration for people that are like that, as opposed to the people that are like, you must do this. This is the way it works. No, that's the way it works for you, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. But it's being open to getting people to be aware of what those challenges might be and having an alternative way of thinking of it, you know?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, we're in a world where, and I've done this before with CrossFit and HIIT sessions, and, you know, as long as I keep turning up and smashing it, you know, I might be able to eat what I like, and, you know, and actually in reality, it's the exact opposite, you know, because training really can, you know, strength training, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. This is what people find hard to get their heads around, you know. And then if you want to be lean and transform your body or do, you know, that happens in the kitchen. It doesn't happen in the gym. Now you might get some gains and, you know, some vanity goals. But for the most part, you know, if we want to feel good, then that's a lot of that's done in the kitchen. And actually you can have a real, you know, a catabolic effect from crushing the nervous system by doing these extensive CrossFit sessions daily, and injuries and all those sort of things that I've experienced, versus doing 100 swings a day and 10 get-ups. That's it. And I'm done in 20 minutes. You know, but that's, you know, you find your way of doing that. But I think there's a lot to be said for strength work, you know, the squat, being able to, you know, if you can't get up the toilet, you've got a problem. You know, and that's, so for me, as we age, I want longevity. I want to be able to go skiing in my 80s with my kids. That's my motivation, not to impress my wife in the bedroom with my six pack, which wouldn't make any difference anyway.
a really good friend of mine, before we move on to relationship, Chris Branch, I had on the show, he asked a fantastic question, and I wholeheartedly agree with him, which is, what am I optimizing for? You know, so for you, I'm optimizing to have the ability to go skiing with the kids. I'm optimizing so I don't have the gout. Whereas if you're optimizing because you want to have that six pack for 2 weeks of the summer, then cool, go crazy. But
sure thing.
It's really powerful, and I think that find for most people, when they take a step back, most people want to optimize for flexibility, longevity, and energy. You know, that's what they really want, if we're honest. So
yeah, absolutely.
Relationships, and obviously for you shared a big part of the journey for you was you got to that point where your wife turned around and said, look, this isn't what I signed up for. And I know that there's many men that will have experienced that are listening to this, or men that may experience this, or even women that are listening to this that are on the receiving end, or are the professionally driven women themselves that maybe their partner didn't sign up for it.
Yeah, it's not limited just to men. You know, some career women out there that maybe have the same challenge. You know, in fact, if they got children, they have a different level of guilt attached to it as well, which makes it even harder. You know, because you know. So yeah, I mean, from my experience, it was my wife and I separated for 2 years. You know, now we're living in Prague, and we are in a better place than we've ever been. We still have our challenges. It would be, like you were saying earlier, these life coaches that say they've got it all together, and it's not always the case. We have to work at it. It's a daily practice being in a relationship. But I think that the challenge for anyone that's out there that's that has that mindset of, I'm doing this for the family. I'm working my nuts off here. I'm providing. Has to accept, yes, that's what you're supposed to do, and there's no recognition for it. That's the reality. If you want recognition for it, go and speak to a coach or a friend or something like that. But we have to accept that's our role. If you're going to provide. And so when we are available, we have to be present. And that's the biggest challenge, I think. And I think there's another thing when we spoke specifically on men, and that's where I pay more of my attention, is the men have kind of felt that they've lost what their identity is. They're being challenged by society as to how I'm supposed to show up in a relationship. It's been a massive shift over the last 30 years, even where, parents will say, well, you changed the nappies, you do that. We never did that. Well, yeah, because things have evolved, and we're proud of that as men, that we kind of have this hands-on approach. But there are other things where men feel challenged by who they're supposed to be, and so in some cases, if they are more dominant by nature, they feel a little bit out of control, and that concerns me, because when men lose control, whether it's at work or in the home, they seek control somewhere else. And that can manifest in some really toxic behavior. And that's usually when, things have gone too far in some ways. So relationships, for me, it's a bit like a business in a way. Not one business model fits every business. There are lots of business models. And I think we can have a philosophical conversation about relationships in some ways, because it's the same for relationships. Not every model works. And I think we hook our hat on one model, which is marriage, which is a monogamous relationship. And, that's it. And that can absolutely be the case, but it's how do you have conversations within that when, what can be some of the most intimate relationships, conversations, when you start exploring or challenging the system, a monogamous relationship. And it doesn't mean that you're giving each other permission to have a polyamorous relationship and do what you like and all that kind of, I'm not, but that might be a model for somebody. And there are people that thrive having those types of relationships, and they're okay with it because they have the maturity to have the conversation, and they can do that, and all the best to you. But I think that often, and men sometimes, I feel trapped in this relationship. I feel trapped in it. It's me. Or have you had the conversation with your wife? Because she might be feeling that way too. And it's like, no, my wife's got a wonderful life. I provide for her, and she's got a wonderful relationship. They're not having the conversation for the most part. So relationships for me are, the game changer for us was just, how do you have these conversations? How do you show up as a father outside of the commitment to work? And how does my wife show up outside of the commitment to the kids? Because we have that, what you might call a traditional relationship in that sense, the model. And the way I see it, my wife is the CEO of the house, and if you don't look after the CEO, you're out of a job. So that's kind of my internal mindset around it, and that's what works for me. And again, it comes back to what you were saying earlier, whether it's nutrition or whether it's this, everybody's got their own way of living their life, and when you share your life with somebody, then it becomes even more important to communicate and have the conversation and discuss some of these topics. And that's been quite profound for us, I think, is to talk about these things rather than pretending that parents do parents' jobs, mum does mum's jobs, dad does dad's jobs. We do marriage type stuff, which, you know, I think for the most part is the biggest problem, you know. So yeah, I think it's people, relationships are about maturity. And if you can find that level of maturity where you can show some vulnerability and have that open dialogue, then that's when you reach that kind of, and I'm not saying my wife and I have got to that stage, but there is a level, a bit like Maslow, if you like, of enlightened relationships. There's a level of enlightened relationship where you've got that team mentality. It's intimacy is taking a whole different level, not because you're practicing, what is it, tantric sex or whatever, but meaningful conversations. You know what I mean? And that might work for some people and might not work for others, but that's where we kind of look at that with sort of the team mentality. And so, but, you know, one of the things I talk about is, you know, particularly with leaders, I say, hey, now, how do you develop your leadership? What do you do? Well, I go on a course, I learn, I read, you know. So how often are you a leader? Well, I'm leader, you know, during the week. And what about at home? You know, well, I'm the leader at home, but well, what have you learned about yourself when it comes to being a father and a husband? You know, what tools? So when I say something like read love languages, they're like, oh, that's fluffy. You know, I'm not doing that. I'm not reading love languages. That's a load of nonsense. Yet you'll put everyone in your business through a psychometric test and truly understand what their behavior is, or you'll do a diagnostic on all your clients so you can sell to them more effectively. Yet you're not prepared to understand your wife's motivations or your own motivations and try and meet somewhere and have that team mentality. You're going, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective.
I love that. I mean, I actually get every single one of my clients that I work with, either a group client or one-on-one client, to do love languages. So they actually get it. And then more often than not, I will ask if their wife or partner or husband are up for doing it, or boyfriend, whatever, that they do it as well. And when people do it, their minds are just blown. So if you're not familiar with it, Google love languages, read the book, it's a free test you can take. And it's so enlightening for people. The amount of people that go, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I never realized that. You know, people that have been married 20 years, that then all of a sudden the penny drops as to why, when they do certain things, their partner loves them, and other times when they get annoyed with them, and it's from doing one test that takes 30 seconds. My love language is touch. So if I were going to the kitchen, my wife's cooking the meal, and I put my arms around her, you know, and give her a kiss on the neck, she's like, get off me. What are you doing? I'm trying to cook dinner here. It's like, whereas if I picked the kids up and said, hey, we're going to the park, or I vacuum the house and do an act of service, then, you know, I'm speaking her love language. And that for me, that was you know, where people feel that disconnect, don't they? Why can't you just be like me? Why do you think like, you know? And so once you get a bit of a framework, it helps. For sure. So then the final key in the 4 key method is mindset, something that both you and I have got a real strong focus on, and it's something that's played a big part of our lives, personally and professionally, and we've used it to our benefit in a multitude of different ways. So how do you define mindset, and more specifically, how do people improve their mindset when it comes to the 4 keys?
Well, I think, you know, you mentioned earlier that business is broad. I would say that in some ways mindset is quite broad, but if we distilled it to 2 things, focus and peace, they're the kind of 2 areas, you know, being absolutely focused, being able to execute on something, but have that inner calm. I think that's one thing. But the thing that comes out more often than not for me, and particularly the people I work with, is confidence. Because a lot of people that I work with have lost their confidence. So they're typically naturally confident people, but they've perhaps got into a rut or something. So it's just unpicking that for me, because it's very easy for coaches to say, well, you've got your vision, you've got your roadmap, go and execute. But for me, the third component of the 4 keys is that live your vision. You know, what does transformation look like for you? You know, what does being more confident look like for you? You know, is it about transformation? Is it about adapting some behaviors? Is it about just feeling unstuck? You know, how are you getting in your way? And through conversation, different tools, different techniques, as coaches, we can explore that with them and just help them feel free. You know, that's often what comes out. Like, I want to feel free again. I want to feel light. I want to feel like I can just tackle these challenges? Why do I just procrastinate? Why am I hesitating around these things? And once we get underneath some of those barriers, those blockers, which are different for everybody, and that's where the real work is done. I think that's where great coaches come to life. Anybody can get someone to draw a vision board. Anybody can get someone to create a roadmap. Anybody can do that. I can put it on an email and send it with instructions to somebody, and they'll do it. But if you've got that ability as a coach, it's like the story of the guy that's got the boat that's broken, and he's tried everybody to come and fix it. I don't know if you know the story, and the guy comes, I'm not sure if you told me actually, and then he finally gets this guy that comes along, and he's kind of following the pipe, and he gets his hammer out and just gives it a big whack, and then the boat starts. And he says, that's $500 or whatever. He says, but you've been on the boat like 10 minutes. He says, yeah, but I know where to hit the boat. It's because of that level of experience and that no one else had. And I think great coaches are able to do that. They're able to, through their experience and their intuition and their vulnerability, are able to explore that with their client and help them get unstuck. So for me, that's where mindset is. And because we can talk about all the cliches of resilience and be strong and be powerful and all that kind of stuff, but it's mindset's on a far more emotional level, and that takes work. We're not talking about therapy. They can have therapy and that can help. More often than not, when I've spoken to people that have had therapy, that it's a bit like seeing the doctor telling you you're really sick and then not giving you a prescription. And I'm seeing that a lot in the therapy world. You've opened up this can of worms. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
Versus the coach kind of unpicking that and just exploring, well, how's that affecting you today? And I think exploring that is key. And so I for me, that's the craft of coaching, is helping people with their mindset and helping them. Sounds all cliche, doesn't it? But reach their full potential, unlock their potential, all of that kind of stuff. But that's the work. That's where we do the work.
So those three things you mentioned: focus, peace, and confidence. What's a tip? What's I know there's multiple things that work towards these things, but if you had a tip for someone, a thing to ask themselves or an action for them to do for each one of those three, what would it be?
Well, confidence is complex. So you can break confidence down into so many different areas. Without having a conversation, there's no diagnostic. I mean, without diagnostic, there's no, work that can be done. But it will always come back to what you mentioned earlier, which is when it comes to mindset, just meditate. Sit and be still. Take action. Whatever you're doing, take an action. And fail. And fail as hard as you can on that action. Go in with that intent. That was one of the biggest shifts actually with Team GB, because there was a lot of concern, fear of failure, and when you allow people to fail, to express themselves, to go all in, to learn, it comes down to one thing: have intent, take action. That's it. In a nutshell, that's all you can do. Now there are going to be reasons why people hesitate, procrastinate. That's where we do the work, but just get out there, do it. What's your biggest fear? Just do it.
Those four elements. So before we look at rounding up, I've got one question for you.
Okay.
So if you could time travel, and which you may be able to do, maybe you've just never told me, I don't know. But if you could time travel and you could go back and you could tell 15-year-old Andrew Sillitoe something that you think would have really served you back then, what would you have said?
the first thing that came into my mind was, when I was 15, my dad died a year later. So what could I have said to him, to get him to think differently about how he's showing up in the world? I always think about how if I could get that man, and we would be having a very different conversation now. So if joking, I would work on my calves and save more money because I got skinniest legs in the world. That's a terrible answer, isn't it? I would.
Here's a question for you, though.
I would have. Yeah, go on.
What would you have told your dad?
Well, what could I have told him? And something I've learned in life is that everybody's on their journey. My dad lived his life to 48, and that was his life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, parents. You're speaking to a parent who's had to. It sounds awful, but bury their child. That child's had that life. That was the journey that child had, and and everything has an experience off the back of these things. And so one thing I've learned in life is about letting go. And probably that 15-year-old child, I would have let go of a lot more stuff. The stuff that's festering in you, the stuff that you're putting so much pressure on yourself to cope with and deal with. It's all going to work out all right in the end. You're going to have a wonderful life, and try not to grow up too fast. By the time I was 21, I thought I had to settle down. I had my daughter was when I was 23, so she's 21 now, and so on. But so I grew up fast. But I think we can all learn that lesson in life, which is how do we allow others to experience their life on their terms. Whether that's someone that's got an addiction, whether that's someone that's got health challenges, whatever it is, that's their experience and that's their life. And we can be there and we can support them. But I think sometimes we try and fix other people's problems before we look inwards and say, well, what's going on for me? How do I live my best life? And how do I let go of some of these things that are keeping me up at night or cause me anxiety, and just to love that people are experiencing the world on their terms.
I think that's a really, really powerful message. And I think that it's so true, isn't it? If we spend our lives trying to go around thinking that people can be fixed and they need to do it like us. And look, how many parents, every parent I think that's out there has thought at some point, at least, I want my kids to be doing X, Y, and Z because I think that's better for them. But let's face it, we've all learned from our own mistakes, and it shapes us into who we are and what we do. And if you have faith that people are doing everything they can with the knowledge they've got at the time, it takes a lot of pressure off. I once heard something which was really powerful for me, which was I believe there's a difference between pain and suffering. So pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice. But even then, someone said to me, but all pain is created as a result of just not letting go. If you just let go of whatever that is, then all of a sudden the pain goes anyway, right? Which I thought was quite an interesting way of looking at things. So.
It's very powerful when you kind of ask yourself, who am I without the thought of that painful thought? Who would you be without that painful thought? Who would you be without the suffering?
Powerful.
Yeah.
So look, I've absolutely loved this. Obviously, always great catching up with you, Andrew, and I'm super grateful for you coming on the show. For people that right now they're thinking, do you know what? Yes, I need to get connected with this man. I need to see his skinny calves. What is it that? Where can people find you? And if they want to find out more about the 4 keys, where can they do that?
I would go to andrewsillitoe.com. That's where all the content is. So all my podcast blogs are all there. That's always a good starting point. So andrewsillitoe.com.
andrewsillitoe.com. And also going to shout out, so you've got Scale Without Burnout is your podcast.
Yep.
And
which you've been an amazing guest on.
Thank you very much. Go and check it out, guys. In fact, what I'll do, I'll put the Andrew Sillitoe website in the show notes. If anyone's listening to this, go straight to the show notes and you'll be able to get access to that. And also your book, of course. So they can get the book, the 4 Keys book.
Yeah, paperback, Kindle, Audible. Yeah, all there. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, Andrew, thank you so much again for being a fantastic guest.
Absolute pleasure.
Really appreciated it. And guys, go and check out Andrew, find out about the 4 keys, and definitely read the book. Until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.